call, dude. I'm jazzed up. I'm just like, I'm amped up over here.
Yes, I love it.
All right. Michael Lexner, what's going on, my man? Thank you so much for jumping on board with me.
Thanks, man. Of course. Thanks for having me. All right, sorry.
Go take care of that bicep peak.
Yeah.
Dope. So let's do this. For the people listening who don't know you, like your background, what you're currently doing, et cetera, your training history, I think it'd be cool if we could just bring them up to speed. And then what I'll say is the whole goal of the episode today is we're going to dive into kind of like top lessons learned in this hypertrophy bodybuilding journey. Most people listening to this are not going to be looking to step on stage and compete in bodybuilding. But I think there's a lot of really important lessons that they can learn from your journey in terms of hypertrophy, muscle gain, something that pretty much everyone listening to this does have an interest in.
Yep.
Right. So we'll kind of like track you from beginner to intermediate to advanced. But if you could just give a quick background on you, training history, blah, 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 where you're at now and like what your goals are looking like.
Yeah. And I'll give a background of, my life, I suppose. It's kind of relevant, right? So I started just in sports my whole life. I played college football, always kind of had a coach. So I went to school for accounting and then never used that degree, but used that to get my CSCS and just kind of continuing education via the strength and nutrition field. So I do some training on the side, but mostly I just enjoy the process of learning in this field. And I came to a place. I played center, so I was over 300 pounds. I lost a bunch of weight, kind of just my own journey, my own thing, just doing research. T Nation was huge back then, obviously, bodybuilding.com. And just kind of, doing shit on my own, losing a bunch of muscle for sure, crash dieting. And then, I got into a corporate life, which is sweet, if anybody else isn't that sick. But I actually started having some back issues, and I started working with a, kind of a PT, a trainer, Henry Lau, Henry, in Rhode Island when I lived in Massachusetts. And he kind of took me out of, my back pain issues and kind of put me back into just like training like an athlete. So, and from there, it's a progression of where you want to go, right? Because at that point, all I can think about is back pain. And I just want to kind of release that. And then after that position, it would be, all right, now what's possible, right? So I didn't begin with the end in mind. It was more of like out of necessity. And then I was like, all right, well, what can I do? And just the progression through learning, right? Being able to be like, all right, I've had this coach, I love Henry and I still go to him for like physical therapy stuff. If I'm feeling hurt, just kind of PRI shit that he does, just kind of maintenance stuff. But from like a training perspective, I just graduated from where we were going and kind of moved on, obviously kept him as a friend. And I think one of the biggest lessons in this journey, and we can kind of go into some of this stuff, is that your coach is really good when they understand that and they want you to do that, right? I think my current coach with Adam Miller at N1, he said probably first or second check-in he had with me, he's like, man, someday you're going to outgrow me and I want you to. He's like, when that comes, just let me know, right? Like my job is to make sure you're smarter than me one day. And you need to go to somebody else because I can't do it for you anymore. And I think finding those type of coaches along the way and kind of jumping from one to one along your progression has been something that's super helpful, especially in this hypertrophy workout phase.
So I actually don't know the answer to this. What was the kind of the trigger for wanting to go all in on the hypertrophy bodybuilding path, right? Because like the end goal for you is to step on stage and win right now, right? For anybody that doesn't know you, like you're humongous and you're just going to continue to get more humongous, which is amazing. But what was like that initial inflection point for you that was like, I want to go all in on this hypertrophy bodybuilding route?
That's a good question. I think it was a number of factors. It was, moving from Henry, I ended up starting doing mass with with Pat Davidson and a bunch of people, and obviously meeting Ben down in Costa Rica, and meeting Ryan and seeing Ryan do his hypertrophy stuff, and he competes in powerlifting and obviously bodybuilding now too. So having like a mentor like that, and he did a lot of my programming at that point, and kind of wanting to go down that path. And I think some of it's the same thing with the back stuff. Like I got into it, and then I was like, oh, I might be built for this. I mean, I'm a little tall for it, but like my body reacted, right? There's a hormonal response. There's a dopamine hit where like, oh shit, I'm progressing, right? Like I picked up a weight and I'm 5-10 pounds heavier in 3 weeks or whatever. It's like my genetics were made for this. So if I was made to be a runner and I ran a mile real fast, maybe I want to run 2 miles or a marathon at some point, but I would never get there specifically. So it was more of playing to my strengths in life. And it was like, all right, I saw this piece. I saw it come out, and I was like, oh, I can build muscle pretty easily compared to other people. And it's just, people would say it's an addiction or whatnot. It's just, it's enjoyable. I enjoy the progress. I enjoy the journey, honestly. So that's kind of where it started. And I see the end goal of doing this, but maybe there's something after it, right? Where I'm like, oh, yeah, this will morph into something else.
For sure. So if we can, I guess, kind of zoom back then on the front end of this journey and look at the programming, the things that you were doing, what did that look like from a bird's eye view perspective? Because I think it'll be cool to kind of maybe track and look at how that's changed from you over time. Because I know Adam, Cass, and the guys at N1 are phenomenal. Like if your goal is to step on stage and compete in bodybuilding, I don't know if there's anyone better. Like our hypertrophy coach, Ryan the Cure, is fantastic. He is amazing. I think Ryan does an unbelievable job. But I think there's a really big difference between stepping on stage and winning at a very high level and then hypertrophy training. Like there's a gap there in terms of the specificity and the detail. But let's zoom in kind of like early on. What were you doing? What did it look like? What did you like and what did you dislike? I think would be kind of an interesting thing to hear.
Yeah. So I guess when I did training with Henry, it was more of always we weren't trying to revert back to being hurt, right? And I get that piece, and that's where he comes from, and that's some of the population he does see. So there got to a point where there is hypertrophy within that for sure, but there is a point where I don't think, not that he wasn't willing to push it, but I was like, all right, I need somebody to push it a little bit more. And that's when I jumped into that mass program, which was kind of a complete opposite of Henry.
Right off the deep end.
Yeah, probably not the best decision, but obviously made a lot of friends doing it. It was just not probably the best decision for me in my hypertrophy stage to add a bunch of muscle. Right? I feel like I kicked the shit out of myself. You reached a certain level of where you could push yourself to. So obviously all these pieces come into play when you're progressing on your journey. It's like, all right, you think what's hard, and then you do something and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm on the floor for like 30 minutes after my workout and I can't breathe. And I got people coming up to me at the gym like, hey, do you need an ambulance? And I'm like, no, dude, like, I just can't breathe.
Leave me alone.
You just walk away because I can't speak.
You're really built to get a lot of reps within a 30-second window at like 6'5", 6'6". You're really built to just crush squats.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not built for that shit at all, for sure. But like to take from that, once again, it's a kick in the dick, and that's how Pat, markets it. It's like, hey, you think you're training hard, but you're not. You take that piece on with you forward. And my next progression was into working with Renaissance Periodization, and I work with Jared Feather over there. And it eventually got to a point where I could probably write their programs for them. It just seemed very elementary. It seemed I understand their market, who they're marketing to. It's kind of Gen Pop, right? It's not specifically people who are trying to compete, although he does have people who do compete. And also there was and I liked it because there was a progressive overload, right? And I hadn't really done that to a point where it was like, okay, we're adding sets every week, and then we get to a point where you feel like shit, and then you take a step back, and then you do the same thing over and over again. So there was a progression there, and I'm not sure if your readership knows Ben House, but we were discussing it, and it was like, he's like, this isn't optimal, and I don't want to kind of kick you out of it because you're getting good results, right? And at the end of the day, it's like, are you getting results? Then what's optimal at that point? Are we talking about? And at the end of the day, yeah, we can't get nitpicky about certain percentages, or how much did you just waste 3 weeks, and what is that like over 10 years? That's 30 weeks. That's a half a year. But
let me interject here just super quick, just so people listening I just want to make sure they're following along. So when we talk about this progressive overload scheme, just like a random example, right? We're adding sets every week. So maybe it's like, you go 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets over the course of a 3-week span, right? And we're trying to find your tipping point of where you're like, hey, bro, I am torched. And then we're going to cycle back and kind of repeat that process.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and if and sometimes there was progression in weight, right? We were looking for a progression in weight over time, or progression in, they use RIR, reps in reserve. So it was like, all right, first week we're doing 3 RIR, and if better Ryan are watching this, they're going to be laughing because it was just a joke. We just like do 3 RIR, and you're like, oh, did you just work in that set, or were you just warming up, kind of thing? And you do that for everything in week 1, and you never get a stimulus set at the end of the day. I mean, you're not going 2 RIR, you're not going 1 IR. In the big things with N1, you get at least 1 failure set. Every week in every exercise. So it was, once again, you could start seeing, and this is why I hire a coach, right? This is why I pay extra money to have him program for me, because I'm learning as he's writing things, right? Like, I'm like, oh, okay, this is why he's doing it. I have my CSCS. I don't have a background in exercise science, but I'll go to bed reading a textbook. But it's like, I'll figure that out, right? I'll be like, oh, this is why you're doing this. Here's the progressive overload. This is why you kind of took a step back this week when I told you this one thing. And then I was like, all right, I can write this program for myself, not really learning much here relative to the money I was spending. And then I was like, I'll spend this money elsewhere. And like I said, there was a progression there. It was, when I was talking to Ben, and he had said, I'd hate to tell you you're not doing it, because then your mindset might kind of be switched for the other thing. So if you're with a coach and you're making progress, and you're happy with the progress, I mean, what are we nitpicking at that point?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
For sure. And like you said, there's a difference between hypertrophy programming and trying to compete, right? Like, I don't need that step just yet. Like, I want to get there. But right now I'm progressing right here, like perfectly fine. We can argue that, could I get 0.5 pounds of muscle if I went over here? And maybe that's going to be an issue at some point. And my biggest takeaway from this was, there was a lot, and I'm like you said, 6'4", 6'5". There was a lot of pleading on my side to be like, hey man, I don't feel like I'm really getting quad hypertrophy with these squats. Can we try something else? And when there was a lot of pushback of, yeah, we're getting knee flexion, so there has to be quad hypertrophy. And then it was like, okay, but I'm not really getting sore in my quads. Not that that's always a super good indicator of hypertrophy, but I'm not getting a pump in my quads. When we're doing 8 to 10 sets, I feel maybe in my back. I don't even feel it in my hips. I don't feel like it's a hip dominant squat. I just kind of feel like I want to die after I squat. And I'm not really feeling specifically. So if I'm doing powerlifting and I need to squat because it's sport specific, then yeah, okay, I get it. Like, it doesn't really matter where I'm feeling it, or where I'm adding muscle. But when I'm going for a specific goal and I'm like, hey dude, I just don't think I'm made like everyone else, or I'm not even, you're telling me to do 20 sets of incline in a week with a barbell, and I'm not really feeling on my barbell, but my shoulders are getting bigger. I'm not feeling my chest, but my shoulders are getting bigger. And then it was like, all right, a constant pleading and a constant, well, this works for everyone else. So, I mean, I don't know what,
and so
I don't know what the problem is.
Were you barbell front squatting or high bar back?
High bar back.
High bar back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this was one place I was hoping we were going to get into, which is the exercise selection piece of this. I think that's probably the biggest game changer for people. So people that listen to this podcast know that like we are not married to any implement. I'm married to an outcome. Like, I think the fact that people are still married to barbells is fucking outrageous. Like, we need to move on, get over it. If you don't compete in a sport that uses a barbell, why use a barbell? Right? And like, you're a perfect example. Like, your anthropometrics, your biomechanics, how you're built, it's like, you're probably not going to fucking get quad if you do just like a barbell squat, right? And so...
Zero quad.
And so... with that being your goal, it's like, well, this works for a lot of other people. Awesome, but it doesn't work for you. So don't be married to the implement, right? So now you're focusing more on a hack squat, in particular, a reverse band hack squat, right? And that's been a good change.
Yeah, it depends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a big change, and it's the same thing with the barbell bench too. And I'll kind of go on what the journey was from there. It was, I was down with Ryan LeCure in Texas, and we were trying to play it around, right? I was like, man, I've made so many, and I get there's a barrier between online coaching sometimes. I've made so many, I don't even know what the word, not statements, but cries for help that, hey, these aren't working. So he was kind of setting me up on the prime platforms of squatting. And it's like, yeah, now I need the 5-inch platform, like I'm wearing heels, so I can actually get quad, right? So my torso can stay straight up. So now the weight's farthest away from my knee joint, right? And now we're actually getting weight on my quad instead of I'm doing just a kind of a hip flexion and all the weight's now away from my hip joint, right? Like then you start talking physics, and that was something that I went to within one, and I was like, oh, this all makes sense. I mean, I took physics. I mean, my degree's in accounting. I understand the math behind this. And then also Ryan showed me from a barbell bench. He's like, man, you're just getting all shoulder with that. You're not like, you need to keep those elbows in and down. Like, this is how people bench in powerlifting too. It's not like elbows out like this, it's down. And I started getting some from benching, but with those two things, it's hard for me to load it, right? It's like, okay. And he recommended, he had done the podcast with Cassim and Ben House, and he was like, hey, listen to that. And then I listened to that, and I was like, oh shit, like this makes sense. It's I can load that hack squat, and that weight's once again farthest away from my knee joint. So now I'm loading my quad instead of me putting high heels on to squat, and now I can only squat 135, right? Because I can't really stand upright like that, and I can't load specifically like that. And it's the same thing with the barbell bench. I can come down here all I want, but I'm not going to be able to load that as much as when I have two dumbbells and I can actually do a chest arm path here. And that was kind of my progression through that. And also, like I had said, N1, they talk a lot about the physics of everything, right? Like how are you going to load a joint? You want the weight away from your joint. It's like when you're doing a walking lunge, you put the weight out in front of you, then you load in that hip joint, right? You're going to keep an upright torso, then you load in that knee joint. And it's like, that stuff's kind of clicks. And I'm like, oh, so they're not telling everyone to do the same thing either. Right? My femurs are bigger than your
my torso,
your whole arm. So it's like I can't be doing the same thing as someone who's 5'5", especially in the bodybuilding sphere, anyways. So that was the progression and kind of the jump from coach to coach, or just my journey of figuring out like, hey, what is optimal for me?
Yeah,
I think everyone.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Good. I was just gonna say everyone needs to kind of look at that from an exercise selection standpoint, right? Like if you're barbell back squatting and your erectors are huge, but your quads are, the size of your bicep, it's like, what are you
Hmm.
doing there? It's cool. Like, yeah, that guy across the gym thinks you're huge because you just put 5 plates on the thing and good morning it. But I mean, but how big are your quads? Do you care about how you look? Maybe not. That's fine. Then go into powerlifting competition. Sweet. But if you're looking for, but then there's an argument against that too. Like the more cross sectional muscle you have, the
Hmm.
stronger you're going to be in that powerlifting competition. So you're going to have to do a hypertrophy phase at some point if you're powerlifting, and you're going to want to make sure you are specifically targeting those muscles because you don't want to waste that hypertrophy phase. And you don't need a barbell on your back even if you powerlift all
Hmm.
year long. You need to do that hypertrophy phase because once again, that is going to transfer into your lifts at the meet.
Yeah, this is getting into a topic where I think we, as an industry, need to spend far more time, because I think that we're slowly making progress in terms of like kind of like slaughtering these old cows, essentially, of like good and bad exercises per se, right? Like most things aren't
Mm-hmm.
good or bad until put within a specific context with a specific individual, right? And like you're a perfect example of like we need to ask better questions. We need to dig deeper to figure out like what's the actual right exercise for this person to get this outcome. And in hypertrophy, I think one of the things for people listening that's really helpful that you can audit yourself on when you're doing an exercise, like where do you actually feel like you're failing? Like what is your limiting factor in the exercise you're doing? Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
if I put a bar on your back, I'm pretty sure the limiting factor is not going to be your legs. Like something else is going to go first, right? And
Yeah.
and you can like track that down to any exercise that you do. But if you're like, hey, I really would like to get some quad hypertrophy, or I'm really trying to get more lat here, and you do the exercise, and
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you're failing, but you're not failing because of that muscle fatigue, then it's like, okay, maybe the exercise setup and execution is wrong. Like let's start there first. Maybe we can change how it's being
Mm-hmm.
performed. If we get it dialed in and it's still not there, then it's like maybe that's just a shitty exercise choice for you, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and what I've been really practicing on for hypertrophy, just overall hypertrophy, is just overhead snatches. They just get me huge, It's just, I feel like everyone should do that because, that is, that's what, I mean, it makes your shoulder mobility good or whatever. I mean, at the end. But, yeah. No, like you said, where are you failing? I mean, because when I was squatting, and I can put a barbell on my back too if I want to, and I even have, people might be like, well, you just wear lifter shoes, and it's like, oh, you don't have ankle flexion. All right, shut the
No,
fuck up.
dumb, 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 dumb.
I'll first, yeah, first of all, I have genetic flexibility. You wouldn't think I could touch my toes in a million years, but I can. It's just like you're saying bullshit stuff, right? Like you're just talking
It's
out
the
your ass.
regurgitation. It's like they heard
And I'm
someone else say this thing who probably heard it from this other someone else. It's just like we're like
yeah.
trying to just like pin everybody into these like fucking little nicely like made boxes, right? But it's just, I don't know. It's just not. You just got to ask more questions, ask better questions.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I'm squatting, I'm not. I couldn't even tell you where I was failing. I was just like, I'm just
Everything.
exhausted, man. I
Yeah,
don't
like you
know.
put a bar in your back, dude.
Yeah, but I'm
Everything's
not.
gonna be
Yeah,
smoked. It's like,
yeah, yeah. I'm not. I'm not anything specific. Maybe my upper back.
yeah,
I mean, I feel like I developed lats by squatting and deadlifting.
yeah.
Right? Seriously, that I don't deadlift off the floor anymore because after I get full hip flexion, what else am I doing? I'm getting the thoracic
Hmm.
extension of flexion, right? I mean, and what am I training at that point? So there's just a point where it's like, what are you trying to get? Are you trying to get glute, or are you trying to show the girl across the room that you can deadlift 700 pounds? Because that's fine, but let's just be real
Yeah.
about it, right? I'm sure girls love that shit. So I don't. But if you're trying to like build your glutes, don't say that 5'5" guy who can get into hip flexion and still grab that bar, and me who's 6'5", like gets into hip flexion and can't even grab the bar without, you know, oh, I don't have hip mobility. You shut up. I'll put you through a wall. I don't give it. Like, what do you mean? How many exercises do you want me to do pre my workout? I can get hip flexion for sure. So how much more hip flexion do you want me to get? And what's even worth it at that point?
And this is where I think, like, as we drill down and get better with our exercise selection, which is something that we spend a lot of time on, like, this transfers over into the athletic performance realm as well. Because even if you have athletes, like you mentioned, like, we're going to go through hypertrophy phases. It's going to happen, right? And it's like, why not hack squat my athletes during a hypertrophy phase? There's no written rule of nature that these people need to be squatting with a straight bar. Like, why not hack squat if that's a better choice? I'm going to get more quad hypertrophy. I'm going to get the outcome that I'm actually chasing for these people.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of fear, right? It's like you feel like you're going to lose it, and which is crazy because you go, and believe me, I'd get nervous if I went on vacation for a week. But like, it comes back, right? And it's very cool to see some of these things because I track everything, right? Like, I'm tracking my measurements every week, and those things can fluctuate so hard, especially if you're losing weight. Like, the last phase I was in, I was doing a more of an intensity phase, so I was doing more strength-based stuff, and we were losing weight while keeping muscle, and you see all the measurements go down, and you're like, oh shit. But within a week to 2 weeks back into a hypertrophy phase, those things are back higher than they were before, right? So there's not this need to have this, and I get it. I get the fear of losing 5 pounds on your squat or going to that hack squat and then coming back to the squat and be like, I have to go down 50 pounds or 100 pounds. And it's like, yeah, but in 2 weeks you're back, right? Like, yeah, the first initial piece might be gone for a week, but you're back with more weight on there because now you have more hypertrophy in your quads and your glutes and whatever you focus on at that time. You use the fucking leg press the right way, and you get these pieces, like you said, with the exercise selection. And you know, those are good tools even outside of the hypertrophy phase and when you're in your strength phase, right? Because something N1 does really well is how to use the leg press for specific muscle groups instead of just I just put like 10 plates on it. Cool, you can do that, but can you do it so you bias glute? Can you do it so you bias adductor? Like, where are you lacking, right? I don't need you to put a band around your legs and walk right and then walk left to get glute. You get glute and hip flexion. Like, what are you doing? And if you can hypertrophy from that, then you're going to be using that once again as I'd say slingshot forward into your strength-based stuff. You know, you look at someone like Ryan LeCure, kid's an animal. He can deadlift well over 600 pounds, and as a natural athlete, and it's like, because he does hypertrophy, right? Like, because he's hypertrophied and he knows how to target his specific muscles, and he uses those phases to go into his
strength and powerlifting work.
His powerlifting competitions.
Yeah, I mean, dude is an actual meat titan. He's yoked. He's a very large man. He has a beautiful, beautiful lat spread.
Ryan, I love you.
Oh, who's here?
Got Oakley in there.
Kelsey is home, and she opened my door. Hey, buddy. Oaks. Oaks, go with mom. Go with mom. I'm going to start putting a sign on the door that's like, recording podcast. Please do not enter.
Yeah.
Can you close the door? Can you close the door? We're literally recording a podcast. Can you close the door? Oh, that's wonderful. That's so good. People will enjoy that if we don't edit it out. We do it live around here, folks. Like the Fox News. Who is that? Fox News guy? Fuck it, we'll do it live. Oh, what was his name? That was phenomenal. If anyone hasn't seen that, that's worth a googs. Okay, so I think the first big thing to hammer on here is just like the importance of quality exercise selection. Like, don't get married to just like, oh, these exercises are good, and because like whoever said whatever. Like we need to dig deeper and think, what's the outcome we want first? And then let's backtrack to find the right exercise for that person at that time to get that outcome. Right. So I think exercise selection is huge.
Yeah. And the lat pull down isn't a lat movement.
Yeah. Like we need to do a better job of like really like funneling down and thinking through like what is this exercise actually doing would be huge. Okay. So I think part two, which would be good to jump into for people, because we've talked about this before, is and it ties into this like hard work component and like moving load, because sometimes, and like I've definitely done this before, where like I'm so worried about this like mind muscle connection and like feeling all these things that I'm really limiting the amount of load that I can move, as opposed to kind of like trusting in myself, being in the position and being like, okay, like let's rip a little bit more weight. Because I think that's like another big one in this realm, right? Like you got to fucking move load if you want to make a muscle get bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was kind of one of the. I get where RP was saying, you're getting knee flexion, so you're getting it. So they're just saying, oh, you're set up for the squat, or you're set up for knee flexion, so you're getting quad hypertrophy, so it doesn't matter. And yes and no, right? Like, so I just wasn't set up properly, right? If the weight is loaded away from my knee joint, and I'm squatting more upright, and you'll see that in like Chinese lifters, right? Because
they have a different pelvic structure,
and it's like
they have a pelvis built to
for
squat.
sure, yeah, yeah, and I mean that's why they're in that sport, right? And so, you know what I'm saying? No, so loading in a specific way, like you get in the hack squat and you get your legs positioned where you need to position, and like you said, you just trust like you're getting knee flexion right now. The weight is on your back, like you're upright. You're not going to get too much hamstring or hip in this movement. If you keep your lower back on the machine, you're going to not change the actual lift. You're going to get this, and like you said, it's not to just feel that quad, because that can take off 90 something pounds. And we talked about it, right? Where I went to an N1 seminar and Kasim came up to me and I'm just doing a row on the cable row, and he kind of puts 100 more pounds on there and he's like, get off that. And he starts doing it and he's like, dude, what are you doing? he's like, you're not using any weight. He's like, you're contracting your mind more than you're doing, and it's transferring into the weight you're using. And I think we spoke before about it. That might be useful at the beginning, right? That might be useful to be like, okay, like you said, am I failing here, or am I getting quad in this? Am I getting lat? Am I getting bicep? Because even you see people doing bicep.
It's a great
curls,
anterior
like,
delta
nice
exercise there.
Exercise you're doing there, guy. Yeah. you're like, is your bicep pumped?
My neck is getting huge.
Feel it in your bicep? So that's a complete. Yeah. I mean, that's a good place to start, right? Because then you're like, all right, I get the setup. I get now that I'm using this, and then you can start ripping the weight without the failure in the actual form. And you're just like, all right, I'm not even going to think about the mind. I'm just going to get this up within the form that I'm using and I'm set up properly for, and I'll be able to use, like I said, it sounds ridiculous, and that's why I don't want to say it, but Kasim put 100 more pounds on it and just was like, I can do this for 10. You just did the other one for 10 and you look like you failed. Like, how about you just do the weight without even thinking it? And it's like, you're talking about doubling the weight, right? Like maybe you did 150 pounds and now I'm doing 250 pounds on the weight. So it's fatiguing to do the mind muscle connection stuff that Jeff Nippard says there's so much studies for this. Once again, cool for a beginner, cool for something that you're like trying to figure out which exercises are right for you, or which placement in the exercise is right for you. But after that, you got to take the training wheels off, and with that will come the weight.
I think like on the front end, when you're learning a new exercise, when we're experimenting with exercises, we'll slow it down, right? Because I do want to make sure you want to make sure that you're actually kind of like feeling, giving what we want out of this exercise, right? But once we kind of have that down, once we have the technique, once we're pretty confident we're kind of hitting what we want, then yeah, like take off the training wheels, like let's move some load and let's move some weight, because you got to, right?
Yeah. 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 And you see, and it's like, it's within form, like it's within your setup, right? Because you get like, you can have a lateral raise turn into a hip pump. Like you're not even using it. So you're talking about within reason, right? Like you don't have to feel your delts, but you have to make sure, all right, I can feel them by not jumping, and then go up in weight and don't even think about it, but don't be changing your form either. Right. I'm sure we all see examples in the gym. You're like, what are you working over
that's
there,
like one of those things, like it's a fine
doing?
balance. Yeah. And I think like that's just going to come with training aids, experience, and exposures. Like you'll get better at getting that fine balance of like being confident in your technique and then being able to focus on the load that's being moved. So let's see. Are there any other like really big takeaways you would like for people to walk away with? Because right now I think we have like the importance of exercise selection, in particular, like stop being married to fucking barbells. Like, can we please move past that? If I can have one contribution to the strength and conditioning community, if it could be that people stop treating the barbell like the second coming of Christ, would be fantastic. And then I think like this mind muscle connection bit of like, don't baby yourself. Like, get the technique down, feel confident in it, but then let's take off the training wheels and move some load. Like, I think those are two really big nuggets that people can take with them. Are there any others that you feel like would be really important to mention or touch on?
No, I mean, I could just go into my pet peeves at the gym, but but the barbell thing, you just don't see a lot of examples of it, right? I mean, you don't see a lot of examples of it, probably because you don't see top level bodybuilders, honestly, because they're not doing that, right? They're not doing. I mean, sometimes you see they're on a Smith machine and they're using that. I mean, essentially, they're kind of doing that. They're taking away, like just putting that on their back and trying to fold at the hip sort of thing. They're trying to get that focus and that piece. Maybe they don't have a hack squat or whatnot, or they like to switch up the exercise selection at that point. Then you're thinking, how many drugs is this person on anyways? But like I'm 6'4", I weighed 275 this morning, right? So you're thinking, I haven't touched a barbell in, I don't know, over a year, right? And I've gained a lot of muscle. It's not something to be afraid of. It's like, I get where the initial piece comes from, because you get that dopamine, right? You see your weights progress on a actual barbell and you're like, oh, this is what I like, or this is what I get addicted to. Or like you said, you see your squat go up. So if you stop squatting, what's going to do it? Or like someone looks at me weird because I only hack squat, and then you got to find a real hack squat too. Or like when you're doing the dumbbells, there's not going to be as much as you can put on the barbell. So you don't feel as cool. I don't know. At the end of the day, like you said, you have to look at your goal and if you are powerlifting, obviously you can't get around it, right? Like if I was powerlifting,
if you're a powerlifter, an Olympic lifter, a CrossFitter, or a strongman, you've got to use a straight bar. It's part of your sport, right? And I think part of the reason we're so married to it is like we think about strength and conditioning as an industry. Like we are so rooted in Olympic lifting and powerlifting. Like that is kind of like the grandfather of strength and conditioning. Are those sports. That's really where things started, was in those two realms. So I can appreciate and respect that that's where we're coming from. And if you compete in any of the sports I just mentioned, then you've got to use a barbell because it's part of your sport. But if you're not competing in those sports and we're just looking to put on strength or hypertrophy or power or endurance, then we got to dissociate ourselves from the barbell or the tool and just really focus on the outcome and then work and track back from that.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you're just trying to look better naked and perform better,
less
there's less
complexity,
injury
right? It's just
risk,
basic concept
right?
of complexity. If I can,
You're not.
see, if you draw it like on an XY axis, and I think of like complexity and outcome, it's like I want to be at the lowest level complexity that gives me the same, if not greater, outcome.
Yeah, and I can jump a hack squat and still get out of it. I'm 6'4". I can hit the bottom of it and still be fine. You know what I mean? Like you could do that as well easily and get out of it. It's not, you're never going to crush yourself under a hack squat. You're not going to crush yourself under a dumbbell. You just go, done. Like, oh, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to leave that thing on your chest, and you can actually go to a point of failure where you may have not been able to go, especially if you don't have a training partner with the other pieces, right? And once again, it's much harder to take your motion in your, like a bench press or even in a squat and switch it to something else with a dumbbell or a hack squat, right? Like you can go low back real quick with a barbell on your back, and you can go shoulder real quick with a barbell on your chest, right? So you're talking about, do you have more chance of injuring yourself from that standpoint? I mean, give or take at that point, why be married to something when you can add in little things like injury prevention? Obviously, there's much more. It's probably
it's a layered conversation. Like there's a lot there. Like, we're definitely not saying that if you use a barbell, you're going to get injured, right? It's just
we're just saying if you use a barbell, you're a piece of shit. Just kidding. I'm judging you across the gym, but yeah.
We should just make you like a tank top or a t-shirt that just says like "fuck barbells." Oh my god, dude! I love it. Oh, Lex, man, thanks so much for coming on, dude.
Yeah. So a couple things, I guess. We'll go. 1 second. I'll give my
let's do it. Let's hit the pet peeves.
My pet peeves. For some reason, it's big in. Don't text while you're working out. Don't be on the phone while you're working out. It's crazy. I mean, are you even working at that point? Let's be real. If you're gonna use the dumbbells, get the fuck away from the dumbbell rack. Like, you ridiculous. I don't even. That shit blows my mind. The kid's curling in front of the dumbbell rack, but. Yeah, I mean, and just, I guess kind of on top of all this stuff is, this is just one piece of it. Make sure you eat. I mean,
we've only talked about a very small portion of this.
That's another huge piece of.
You're kind of a professional eater.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get big if you do. Yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? And you can ask Ryan when he comes on this stuff too. It's like you're not gaining muscle if you're not in calorie surplus. It's like. And if you're only in a calorie surplus for a week, what are you doing? I mean, at the end of the day, you can stay skinny all you want, but there's two pieces to it, right? There's I mean, obviously there's a million too. You could talk about sleep and shit, but I think a lot of people miss the boat on the food piece. And it's just to aid you can go to the gym, but if you're not eating, you're not going to get that big. Yeah, for sure.
That's a big one. For sure. Yeah, we just don't have time to like dive into everything because like there's complexity. There's so many layers to this. We've kind of hammered more on the nuts and bolts of what's going on when you actually train. But then, we got to think about the nutrition. We got to think about the supplementation. We got to think about sleep. We got to think about outside stressors. Are you going on like 20-mile hikes on the weekend? Right? Like, just like those are the other things that start to come in. We have to have those conversations. But yeah, dude. I like it. So the pet peeves are don't text.
Yeah. Perfect.
Don't be on your phone. And don't stand in front of the dumbbell rack. Awareness.
And be aware of people around you. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, I mean, there's other people in the fucking gym. Like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, and then you steal my fucking weights off my machine. Like, dude, you're getting my Boston accent right away, and I'm death staring you for fucking. I'm gonna take it right off your barbell that you just put it on, and I'm gonna be like, "What are you fucking doing, guy?"
The joys of gym life. There.
So
this is just until we build our ranch, and then no one's gonna be allowed to come unless they have feel, and then we'll be good.
Yeah, for sure. Gym rules. Well, yeah. Ask Ryan. I'll eat Fruity Pebbles in front of him while he's deadlifting. He thinks I'm a piece of shit.
So that's one of my big pet peeves.
Steal
Is
all
someone
his
setting up for a
mangoes.
lift and then you walk in front of them. Like if you're setting up for a squat or setting up for a deadlift, and like I go
Really?
to pull or go to squat, and somebody just like walks right in front of me, I'm like, oh, you motherfucker! Like,
Really? That ruins your concentration that bad?
it's not that bad. I just hate it, right? Because it's like you have a routine, you have a flow, and it's like if someone just like walks in front of you, you're like, yo, just like walk behind me, walk over here, walk over there. Like it was a bigger. I think it's a bigger deal in Olympic lifts and things like that. But yeah, like if you're trying to pull big weight or squat big weight, like you want to be focused entirely on that one outcome. Like I don't want anything in front of me that's gonna like potentially distract my brain away from like that singular task.
Well, what about a girl with a big ass? Because then you're talking about there's got to be some sort of driver for being
Motivation
testosterone, right? Yeah, I mean, let's be real.
Yeah, it's just ancestral Neanderthal. It's like the South Park episode. Where the girls start to have boobs for the first time, and the guys all walk around. They turn into like cavemen, like
they'll turn into monkeys. Yeah.
It's a good thing the majority. Let's be real. Yeah,
that's pretty much the gym, anyways. Let's be real.
All right, dude. Fantastic. This is good. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to find you and you would like to be found, where is the best place for them to look?
I mean, they can look on my Instagram. I don't really do much online, but if you want to DM me or some shit, have any questions about hypertrophy training, anything like that, let me know. I'm always an open book.
What's your IG handle?
Oh, sorry, Michael Lexner. That's pretty simple.
Cool. We could have just left them on the
first name, last name.
Oh, fantastic! All right, fam. Everybody have a beautiful week. We'll talk soon. Yeah, that's all I got for you. Later.